I'm Sue. The dining room fell into a deathly silence as I stood up, my hands trembling slightly but my voice steady. The analysis Craig just described? I know it inside out. I built that methodology from scratch in 2019, spending 4 long months perfecting it. Craig's smile vanished, replaced by a look of panic. My mother's eyes widened in shock, and my father set down his glass with a thud. The judge, who had been so impressed by Craig's supposed work, leaned forward, his expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. Let me rewind a bit. I live in a small apartment in Boston, a place that may seem modest but is my sanctuary. I'm a forensic accountant, a profession that my family has always dismissed as a mere hobby. I've spent years building my career, earning my CPA and becoming a certified fraud examiner. But to my family, I've always been the black sheep, the one who couldn't get her act together. My mother, Linda, is a controlling woman who has always favored my brother, Jake. She's the type who plans every detail of our lives, like a puppet master pulling the strings. Jake, on the other hand, has always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. A few days ago, my mother called me with the news that I was finally allowed to attend Jake's fiancé's family dinner. Keep your mouth shut, she snapped. Her father is a powerful judge, and we can't afford to have you embarrass us. I was used to her harsh words, so I simply replied, got it. I was at my desk, reviewing quarterly filings for a client, when she called. It was the kind of work I'd been doing for 6 years, careful and precise, but my family never seemed to notice or care. My mother's voice on the phone was filled with disdain as she reminded me to wear something simple and to keep my answers vague if anyone asked about my job. I walked to my closet and chose a simple black suit, the one I wear to important meetings. Then, for some reason, I decided to pack my laptop in my bag. It was a gut feeling, a sense that I might need proof of who I really was. The next evening, I drove to my parents' house. The house smelled of my mother's favorite candles, a scent that always made me feel suffocated. My father, Tom, was sitting on the couch, sipping a glass of wine. He gave me a small nod but didn't say a word. My mother was in the living room, holding a notepad with bullet points. She was going over the talking points for the dinner, all focused on Jake's achievements. Jake's position at the law firm is very promising, she said, her voice filled with pride. He's been making a name for himself, and the judge is very impressed with his work. I listened in silence, feeling like an outsider in my own family. We drove to the judge's house in Jake's car. I sat in the back, looking out the window at the passing scenery. Jake glanced at me through the rearview mirror and said, "Thanks for coming, Sue. It means a lot." But I knew he only said that because he needed me to be quiet and cooperative. When we arrived at the judge's house, we were greeted by his wife, Margaret. She was a warm and friendly woman, but my mother quickly stepped in and introduced me as the one who's still finding her way. I forced a smile and followed them into the dining room. The table was set beautifully, with crystal glasses and a centerpiece of fresh flowers. The judge, Henry, sat at the head of the table, looking imposing with his silver hair and sharp eyes. Jake's fiancée, Emily, was sitting beside him, looking radiant. Dinner began, and the conversation flowed smoothly, with my mother steering every topic back to Jake. He talked about his work at the law firm, and I couldn't help but notice that he was describing an analysis that I had done. It was my methodology, my formulas, and my data. I set my fork down and listened in disbelief as he took credit for my work. I wanted to speak up, but I knew that my mother would be angry. So I stayed silent, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, the judge looked at me and said, "You look very familiar. Have we met?" My mother quickly jumped in and said, "Oh, Sue doesn't get out much. She's more of a homebody." The judge's brow furrowed, but he didn't press the issue. After the main course, the judge excused himself and walked over to my seat. "I apologize for pressing, but I know your face. What do you do for a living?" he asked. I looked across the table at my mother, who gave me a small shake of her head. But I couldn't hold back any longer. I'm a forensic accountant, I said, my voice steady. I'm a certified public accountant and a certified fraud examiner. I specialize in fraud investigation and expert testimony. The judge's eyes widened in recognition. The Thompson case in 2022. You were the expert witness. You testified in my courtroom. The table went quiet. Everyone looked at me in shock. My mother stood up and said, "Sue tends to exaggerate things. It was just a small consulting gig." But the judge wasn't convinced. He looked at me and then at my mother, his expression stern. I excused myself and walked down the hallway. I heard my mother's voice coming from the powder room, where she had pulled Jake. "She's going to ruin everything. I told you she shouldn't have come," she said. Jake replied, "I tried to talk her out of it, but she insisted." I stood there, listening to their conversation, my heart breaking. I knew that they had always seen me as a burden, but I never thought they would steal my work. I went back to the study and opened my laptop. I found the original file, the one that I had created in 2019. The metadata showed that it was my work, and there was no way they could deny it. I also found an email from my mother to Jake, dated a few years ago. The subject line read, "For your application." The email said, "Here's the file I told you about. I cleaned it up for you and removed her name. Just use it. She won't notice." I took a screenshot of the email and saved it to my phone. Then I walked back to the dining room, my head held high. As I sat down, Jake stood up and raised his glass. "To Emily and our future together," he said. But I couldn't let him get away with it. I stood up and said, "I'd like to say something about that analysis." The room fell silent again. Jake's smile faded, and my mother's face turned white. I looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, the analysis that Jake described is my work. I have the original file with 6 years of metadata, and I have the email where my mother instructed him to use it as his own." I opened my laptop and showed the file properties to everyone. I also pulled up the screenshot of the email on my phone. The judge looked at the evidence and then at Jake. "Did you know?" he asked. Jake opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at me, his eyes filled with guilt. Emily stood up slowly and looked at Jake. "I can't believe you would do this," she said. She took off her engagement ring and placed it on the table. The judge looked at my mother and said, "Stephanie, you've been misleading me. I expected better from you." My mother's face crumpled, and she started to cry. "I did it for Jake. I thought it would help his career," she said. I looked at her and said, "You didn't help him. You stole my work and tried to make me look like a failure. You've been doing this for years, and I'm done." I packed my things and left the house. As I drove home, I felt a sense of relief. I had finally stood up for myself, and I knew that things would never be the same again. The next morning, my father called me. "Jake's engagement is off, and the judge has asked him to submit a formal explanation to the law firm's ethics committee," he said. "Your mother is devastated." I listened in silence. I didn't feel any joy or satisfaction. I just felt sad for the family that I had lost. A few weeks later, I received an email from a law firm in New York. The subject line read, "Referral from Judge Henry, Forensic Expert Engagement." The email said that the judge had recommended my services for a federal fraud case. I read the email twice, a smile spreading across my face. The judge hadn't just recognized me at dinner, he had remembered my work and was referring clients to me. It was a validation of all the hard work that I had done over the years. I typed a reply, thanking the law firm for the opportunity. As I hit send, I looked out the window at the city below. I knew that there would be challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them. I was finally being recognized for who I was, and I was determined to make the most of it.